everyone. Ankita, can you confirm?
Yes, it is visible, Chandan.
Okay, okay. So the entire FLA runs into four sections. There is fifth section also, which is a variation report, but majorly we have to fill in information in first four sections. So section one talks about normal company related details, the identification details, name of the company, PAN and SIL, or in case of LLP, it's LLPIN. Other entity, it is UIN. So these details are generally auto-filled because we've already provided these details while registering our entity. So the gray shaded are the ones which are auto-filled basically for the understanding of everyone. Then comes the contact details, name of the contact person, telephone number, mobile number, etc. of the contact person. So this is the authorized person. Details who has been registered as authorized person also. So we need to fill in these details. Email ID, head of institution, for example, CEO, CFO, if you need to mention that. So they need to know who is the head of institution or whom they can held responsible in case of any non-compliance. So contact person is there to work on the filings, dealing with RBI on day-to-day matters in case. But head of institution is the one who is responsible. So we need to see who is actually responsible for all these compliances and all, and we can accordingly provide email ID of that person, designation and website if any of the company. Account closing date, so generally it is 31st of March, but there are certain companies who have Jan to December or any other financial year, so we need to provide our account closing date, etc. So even if account closing date is different than April to March, 31st of March, we, as Ankita clarified, we still need to provide information on the basis of 31st March only. So that is the reporting date basically, which RBI considers for FMA. Nature of business activity. So you will find a drop down here. You have to select your activity. If you have more than one activities in your company, select the activity which has major revenue. Whether your company is merged or amalgamated during the year. See, if your company has got merged into another company, your company does not exist anymore, you need not file, you cannot file. But if any other company has merged or amalgamated into your company, so you need to provide details about, if there is any merger happened during the year, yes or no, and the name of the company is merged in case there is a change in name. Whether the company is listed, yes or no, you need to provide that. Then comes the shareholding part. You need to provide here in the total ordinary equity shares or participating preference shares issued as of the previous year and the current reporting year. In our case, 31st March 2024 and 31st March 2025. So ordinary equity shares, participating preference shares, and non-participating preference shares. So participating preference shares means the preference shares who've got rights in the surplus of the company or surplus or the dividend in case extra dividend is distributed as surplus, right on the dividend part as well, right? So instead of whether the preference shares are convertible, non-convertible, for the purpose of FLA, the shares are actually bifurcated by way of participation and non-participation. Then identification of reporting entity in terms of inward FDI. If your company is an associate of foreign entity, the foreign entity holds between 10 to 15%, then your entity becomes an associate of the foreign entity. If it is more than 50%, then it is a subsidiary. Or if it is a public-private partnership, SPV, or any other. For example, the foreign shareholding in your entity is less than 10%, so you'll have to select others. There are certain examples wherein some foreign investors have invested into the company. So instead of an entity investing into that company, there is a foreign individual, Indian or foreign, but a non-resident Indian, we can say, holding more than 50%. So, but since the investor is an individual, you need to select others in that case. Then type of your company, whether it's a financial company, other financial company. In case it's not a financial company, then you need to select others, right? So you'll find a drop down in that case. Whether the company is an asset management company, yes or no. If the company has got technical for financial collaboration, yes or no, you need to provide. And whether the company has any business activity during latest financial year. So there might be certain companies who have received foreign investment, but there was no business activity during the year. So you would need to select it accordingly, whatever is applicable in your case. Moving on to section 2, a bit more details on the paid up share capital and the shareholding part. So total paid up capital, earlier you have mentioned the number of shares, ordinary equity, participating, etc. So again, we have to mention the number of classes also applicable in section 1. In case the number of classes are more than one, the it will ask you to mention face value on its own. Otherwise, it will take face value from the one which we mentioned in the section 1. If the classes are more than one, it will deactivate entering face value in section 1, and you'll have to manually enter it here. The number which which are appearing shares in actual, ordinary, participating, non-participating, and amount in INR lakhs. Suppose you have only one class of equity share or one class of preference share, and you mention that accordingly in section 1, so the amount will auto-calculate it here. But in case the classes are more than one, it will not be auto-calculated because you may have different nominal values, different face values for your shares. In that case, you will have to manually enter the details in this box, right? So this is the overall total paid up share capital held. Out of that, now we have to mention the non-resident holding. So equity share capital bifurcated into, as per your shareholding pattern, whether it is held by individuals or companies or FIIs, FECIs, foreign trusts, private equity funds, pension funds, whatever is applicable, NRIs, PIS, for example, you need to mention the number of shares and amount in INR lakhs, whichever is held by them. Then participating preference share, again, we have to bifurcate as far as shareholding pattern, whoever are holding this. The same category of shareholders are mentioned here. Also, you need to select whatever is applicable in your case. Then the total of participating and non-participating will appear automatically here. Total paid up capital and total equity and participating preference shares. So these boxes will be auto-filled when you fill in the details in the below cells. So this will calculate your non-resident equity and participating preference share capital in percentage, because you mentioned the total paid up capital as well as the non-resident equity holdings. Moving forward, you need to provide details about your profit and loss account, profit and loss before tax during the financial year, April to March 24 and 25 in this case, and profit and loss after tax. Dividend, if any, if you've paid during the year, interim or final, you have to mention here. And tax on dividend, generally this is not applicable now because dividend is taxable at the hand of the recipient these days. So balance will be your retained profit, so which will be auto calculated. Then you have to mention reserve and surplus from the balance sheet. So this reserve and surplus as coming in your balance sheet, including the accumulated profits, if any are accumulated losses, whatever, you have to mention here. So this includes all your reserves, securities premium, P&L balance, etc. Out of which you have to mention the P&L balance separately also here, right? So if you see, this is a here you need to mention April to March 2024 previous year balance and this year's balance. So effectively, the retained profit which is coming in the above section, retained profit during the year for the year 2025. So previous year profit and this year's profit, the balance should come accordingly in the profit and loss section. So net worth will be auto calculated. So this net worth will be the reserve and surplus plus the paid up capital which you have mentioned, above. So accordingly, the net worth of the company will be calculated here. Then you need to mention the sales and purchases made during the financial year. Domestic sales. So this is the sales which is appearing in your P&L. Domestic and export, you need to. So how do you find whether it is domestic or export? You have to go to the notes to financial statements wherein foreign exchange earning and outgoes are mentioned. So imports and export, etc. will you will find there, and the balance is your domestic purchase, right? Again, on the purchase point, purchase is very clearly defined in the FAQs also of given by RBI. So purchase means any expenses which is coming in the P&L minus the depreciation, right? So it might be your rents and repairs, your legal expenses, whatever. They consider it as your total purchase. It's not only the purchase of goods and services, total expenses which are appearing in the P&L, including the capital purchases, but excluding depreciation. is the figure which we need to mention here. So is there any employee in your company? Yes, no, you need to mention the number of employees on the payroll as at the end of previous year and the current reporting period. So these are the details. Now we have to mention the details about individual shareholdings, uh, investments made under FDI. So this section is divided into two parts. If the investors hold more than 10% of equity and participating preference shares on a fully diluted basis, you need to mention details here. If the shareholding is less than 10%, you need to, it will come later on. So 10% or more equity participation, equity means equity and participating preferences both, as I mentioned. So you need to mention how many foreign direct investors are holding 10% or more of such capital, and month and year of receiving FDI for the first time in your company, not from that particular, one particular investor, but first time your FDI is received in your company, right? Then the details about, the foreign direct investors who have more than 10% shareholding in your company. Name of the non-resident company or individual here, you need to mention. Country of non-resident investors, if you get a drop down here, you need to select the country of non-resident investor and the percentage of equity and participating preference share capital as and March 24 and March 25. So once you calculate the percentage, again to reiterate, this percentage has to be calculated on a fully diluted basis. So once you put in the percentage, it will automatically show the liabilities to direct investors. So this percentage will be the percentage of the net worth which is calculated above. So suppose your investor holds 15% in your company, you mentioned 15% here in the percentage of equity. So this the total liability will be 15% of the overall net worth which is due to that foreign investors, and it will be auto calculated here. Then claims on direct investor, reverse investment. There might be certain cases wherein your company has invested in the foreign investor entity. So in case of any such investments, you need to mention the details here. Then other capital liabilities to direct investors. In case there are any other liabilities to direct investors, for example, your investor has got equity shareholding in your company and non-participating preference shares. So non-participating preference shares will come here. Participating preference shares come, at the top itself, but non-participating preference shares will be coming as other liabilities or other capital. Or your investor is holding CCDs, NCDs, is has given any loan to your company, or there are any trade receivable, trade credits, etc. All those numbers will come here. You'll have to aggregate the overall liability to the direct investor, and you need to put in the number here. In case you have any claims on the direct investor, for example, you are providing any services to your direct investor, and you have certain trade credits which you have to recover. So those credits, those receivables, you would need to enter here. Disinvestments in India during the year, in case there is any disinvestment during the year. For example, previous year your investor was holding 15%, now your investor is holding 12% and has liquidated 3%. So that will be a disinvestment of 3%. You would need to mention the details of disinvestments here. But this only the change in percentage does not mean that there is disinvestment. For example, there is dilution in your shareholding by way of issuance of further capital, but there is no liquidation. Then you don't need to mention anything here at the disinvestment, right? So, for example, yeah, here you have mentioned details of one foreign investor who is holding 10% or more. In case you have more than one, for example, the second investors, you need to put in the same details, similar details for the second investor here. So you find a section add or save button here. Just after you fill in the details of one investor, you click on add, and you will find the similar boxes to fill in the details for the second investor. Then investment in India under FDI scheme, less than 10% equity holding. So in case of less than 10%, the details are mentioned not the investor wise but country wise. So in case you have some investors coming from investor from Singapore, let's say 4 or 5 investors, but all of them are holding less than 10% shareholding. So you would need to club their shareholding and you need to mention the country as one. In case there are more than one countries, you would need to mention more than one countries. Again, this section relates to less than 10%, so there could be certain other related parties